What's up, everyone? Chris back again with another episode of What Could Have Been in Wrestling. Last week, I took us back 25 years ago to a topic that has been discussed quite a bit, that being the infamous finger poke of doom. This week, I'm going to take us to something a little more recent, and it was just 8 years ago, actually, so it's pretty recent. And with it being close to Summerslam, it feels like an appropriate topic. And I want to talk about what if Finn Balor didn't get injured in his match against Seth Rollins at SummerSlam when he won the Universal title. Now, everyone knows the shot that I opened the video with, if they were watching at that time, where Finn Balor has the title on his shoulder, but his other arm is in a sling because of the injury that happened when he took that power bomb to the barricade to the outside in his match against Seth Rollins for the title. Now with that, Finn, to his credit, he finished the entire match. And the match went on for another about 10 to 15 minutes. And you can see for a bit, Finn, when he tried to post and catch himself, because it looked like when Seth did that power bomb into the guardrail, or the barricade, or whatever they call it, Finn tried to actually post his arm out to catch himself, and that's what caused the injury. And you can see throughout the match, if you go back and watch it after that, for a good while, he's actually keeping that arm kind of coiled in, and he's definitely having some mobility issues with it. My guess is adrenaline took over, and he was able to get some mobility out of it, but then when things came back down to earth, I think that's when he realized he might have a serious injury. And as you remember, he was out for several months because of it. So I just want to talk about, what if that doesn't happen, and even if Seth does do that spot, what if Finn obviously lands differently, and what if that injury doesn't happen? So we all know that Finn, he did have to forfeit the title the next night, coming out in the sling and talking about his injury, but then saying when he's back, that title is the first thing he's coming for before handing it to Mick Foley, who was the Raw commissioner at the time. I know from what I read, apparently Seth Rollins was actually supposed to take a little bit of a step back from the title picture, and he was going to transition off into a feud with Kevin Owens. If Finn is healthy, I still think you can do that feud. I think you can actually still keep that feud alive, and you can obviously make Finn now the top face on Raw, and also make his main foil in the heel Kevin Owens. And obviously I say this because after the injury to Finn, they did do that 4-way elimination match to crown a new champion on Raw. Very good match. And they had done that 4-man sit-down panel because it was Kaz, Kevin Owens, Roman Reigns, and Seth Rollins, where Corey Graves was the moderator, and they all basically talked themselves up and talked about why they were the next champion. In that match, Triple H obviously helped Kevin Owens win, and that was actually what started off Seth Rollins' face turn, and in order to get him to feud with Triple H and get his focus off the WWE title. Like I said, I still think they can do that similarly if Finn Balor is healthy and still champion. Because if you remember, when Finn walks out without the title, after he gives his speech talking about his injury and how he's going to have surgery, when he walks out, as he's on the entrance ramp, right before he's about to go through the curtain, Seth Rollins' music plays, and they cross paths. Seth Rollins starts laughing at him, and then obviously talks about how he should be made champion. What I think you could do here is, Finn can still come out the next night after SummerSlam, talk about his big win, and talk about how he's proud to be the Universal Champion on Raw, and will take on all comers, because of course he's a babyface, so he's going to cut that kind of promo. The first person that could come out is Seth Rollins demanding his rematch. And then, of course, I still think you can have Mick Foley as commissioner in the ring, Stephanie in the ring as the GM, still in charge of Raw, and of course happy to have their champion, but you still have Seth stating his case of why he should be the number one contender because Finn got lucky, it was a fluke, etc. What they could have then is Kevin Owens then come out and tell Seth Rollins, you lost last night. Time for you to get to the back of the line because I'm the rightful number one contender. At this point, Kevin Owens still the year previous had that really good feud with John Cena and had been Intercontinental Champion. So now he wants to set his sights on the the Universal Championship. So he's going for the top prize. What you can do there is you can have Mick Foley then make the match and say, hey, you think you're both worthy of being the number one contender? Let's find out. Tonight, on the main event here at Raw, we're going to have Seth Rollins take on Kevin Owens, and the winner is the number one contender for the Universal Championship. And I know the next Raw PPV they had, I'm not calling them the premium live events, we're just going to say PPV for each show, was Night of Champions or Clash. I think it was Clash of Champions. Excuse me. So that's the main event of Raw that night. And what you can still have is have a similar ending to what they did when Triple H turned on Seth Rollins and pedigreed him in the middle of the ring, and then obviously handed Kevin Owens the belt and raised his hand as the victor. You can still have that. You can have it where the match is then made no holds barred, and Seth Rollins obviously takes on Kevin Owens this time one-on-one. Because I know, of course, they could have a good match. During that match, you can have Triple H come out. You can actually just have him whisper something to Stephanie. Because remember, Stephanie and Mick Foley were at ringside watching that four-man elimination title match because they were going to present the winner with the belt before Triple H just took it from Mick Foley and then raised Kevin Owens' hand. Triple H can come out, have a quick, conversation with Stephanie, and then Mick Foley can kind of be left out of it, like, hey, what was that all about? Triple H comes in when they're both down. That you can have one of those double downs where they both clothesline each other. I'm talking about Seth and Kevin Owens. They're both down. They're both groggy, but making their way to their feet. Triple H helps Seth Rollins up, acts like he's going to pedigree Kevin Owens, and then hand him the win. Turns around, pedigree Seth Rollins, costs him the match in the number one contendership. That will shift Seth Rollins' focus from the title to Triple H because that's the guy that cost him the belt, or a shot at the belt. So now we're going to move to Night of Champions, and I think Finn obviously takes on Kevin Owens, and they can definitely call back to their NXT rivalry, because remember, it was Finn Balor who beat Kevin Owens for the NXT title, and then he beat him again in the rematch at that ladder match. I know the first one was Beast in the East, where he beats him for the title, and then he beats him again when he does the coup de grace off the ladder in the ladder match rematch for the NXT title. In this time frame where Finn Balor's healthy and champion, I still think he beats Kevin Owens at Night of Champions. I think he beats him with the coup de grace, and I know that obviously that feels like it kills Kevin Owens, but I still think Kevin Owens can have an out on this. The reason I say that is because you can obviously have it where the ref gets knocked out throughout the match, and of course they were doing a lot of interference in these matches. This was a trend in title matches. They were doing a lot of interference. If you remember when Roman Reigns was champion and feuding with AJ Styles, both times the club and the Usos interfered, and then there was the no holds barred match where there was a ton of interference. And of course, this was around the time when Kevin Owens and Jericho were working together as in the best friends angle. So you can have interference with Jericho there too. And you can have it obviously where the ref gets knocked out. And then of course, Kevin Owens hits the pop-up powerbomb. He has a visual pin on Finn, and then Jericho is able to revive the ref to help Kevin Owens win the title. What happens there is Finn can kick out. Then you can have the miscommunication where you just do the reversal spot. Kevin Owens charges at Finn. He hits Jericho instead to take him out. Finn hits that shotgun dropkick and then the coup de grace to win it. Kevin Owens can come out the next night on Raw and show and claim, I had you beat. It was the incompetence of the ref is why I'm not champion right now. And I want a rematch. And then he can obviously goad Finn into it, saying that you know you're not a real champion, you know you got lucky. And basically keep poking at him until Finn agrees. Finn then obviously would defend the title again against Kevin Owens at Hell in the Cell, because I know that was the next Raw PPV they were doing. Obviously, I think this match would obviously set up, they would want a moment like the ladder match that I referenced, because I know obviously in reality it was Seth Rollins versus Kevin Owens in the Hell in the Cell, and I know they'd want to have a similar type moment where Finn would, jump obviously off the Hell in the Cell, possibly through a table and do the coup de grace. Or, of course, if they just did it, they don't have to do it as a Hell in the Cell match in this case. They could do it as a cage match, and Finn Balor can then do the coup de grace off the top of the cage. The same idea with the Cell, obviously, as with the steel cage. The idea is to keep interference out, and we all know how well that works, keeping the interference out. So what you can do here is actually I would have Kevin Owens beat Finn Balor. And actually, you know what? Let's just keep it as Hell in the Cell. And we're going to have Kevin Owens beat Finn Balor with the help of Chris Jericho. Obviously, what you can have there, you can have Chris Jericho hiding under the ring. When Finn does hit the coup de grace, say they do a callback to the NXT match and they actually bring a ladder, they go underneath the ring. Kevin Owens pulls out a ladder, and then throughout the match, weapons get used besides the Hell in the Cell. And if you think it doesn't make sense to have weapons when you already have the Cell, just take a look at the history of what they've been doing in the Hell in the Cells, and it does happen a lot. You can do it just the callback to the NXT match, coup de grace off the ladder, and then right when it looks like he has it won, Jericho from underneath the ring comes in, breaks up the count. He starts beating up Finn. Finn can get a quick comeback, hitting both, basically taking on the 2-on-1. He hits Jericho with a shotgun dropkick, but then when he turns around to run to Owens, what he can do is he can run right into a pop-up powerbomb. Jericho can get up, and then one more time, obviously, Jericho can nail Finn Balor probably with a chair or hit him with the code breaker. And then a powerbomb in the middle of the ring by Kevin Owens. And Kevin Owens beats Finn Balor, to win the Universal title. From there, obviously, you can still keep the whole angle going with Jericho and Owens. They worked really well together, and they were obviously week to week, part of the best segments on Raw. And you can have Finn demand a rematch, basically saying, I got screwed, which is true. To protect Finn, he's screwed out of the title. And while he demands it at Survivor Series, Mick Foley can come out and tell him, you do deserve a rematch, Finn, but it's not going to be at Survivor Series, because Survivor Series is the battle for brand supremacy. That's what they were doing, and I remember at that Survivor Series, it was a big match. It was that 5-on-5 elimination match, SmackDown versus Raw. And in my opinion, to me at least, going back and watching that 5-on-5 match, yeah, it had some rough spots because of Shane McMahon being in the match. And he took that sphere that gave him a legit concussion and knocked him out. And so his elimination got messed up. But that 5-on-5 match, that might be my favorite 5-on-5 elimination match ever that they did. It was a long match. I think it was almost like 50 minutes. But I remember really enjoying it. So what you can have instead is to make SmackDown vs. Raw feel like a big deal. Obviously, AJ Styles was champion on SmackDown. Kevin Owens was champion on Raw. They were both in the match, and they were both, I think, Jericho and Kevin Owens, they declared themselves for Survivor Series co-captains as best friends. Because they're best friends, they're co-captains. And AJ Styles and I think maybe Dean Ambrose were co-captains for SmackDown. Because they had their feud going on as well, because AJ Styles had cheated to beat Dean Ambrose for the WWE title on SmackDown. So what you can have there is still have the 5-on-5 elimination match, and then Mick Foley tells Finn, I need you on Team Raw, and I need you to work together with Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens. So you can still have that tension there. And the 5-on-5 match, I know it was for Raw, it was Jericho and Owens, Roman Reigns, Braun Strowman, and Seth Rollins. What you can do, what I think honestly, is if replacing a guy off Team Raw to take on the Team SmackDown. Team SmackDown, just for everyone's knowledge, was, like I said, AJ, Dean Ambrose, Randy Orton, Shane McMahon, when he took Baron Corbin's place. I would have rather seen Baron Corbin in that match as their cleanup guy, personally. Like I said, Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton, who was doing their angle where Orton was actually part of the Wyatt family at that point. I actually think you can take Roman Reigns out of that match. And yeah, I know, by today's standards, take Roman Reigns out, but if you go back to 2016, Roman Reigns was actually feuding more in a mid-card role, because I know on purpose they were trying to put him in a mid-card role and phase him down for just a small time period, because Vince felt putting him in the mid-card picture for the U.S. title, which is what they did because he was U.S. champion at the time, showed that they were really trying to focus on new stars. And it did feel like they were for a bit, because if you remember, Finn did pin Roman Reigns on Raw to become the #1 contender for the new Universal title, and that got him his match versus Seth Rollins. He'd hit Roman with the coup de grace, and you see him getting his hand raised with a laid-out Roman in the middle of the ring. So Finn did get a clean win over Roman at that time. And Roman was feuding with Rusev, and like I said, he was feuding with him for the U.S. title. If you really wanted to make fans think that he wasn't going to be looked at or be booked at and pushed as in the main event scene as much as he had the year previous, and I know part of it was because Roman had gotten in trouble for that steroid violation, that wellness violation, which is, I think, another reason why they got the title off of him at Money in the Bank. Then you can have him in a mid-card match, again, versus Rusev, for the U.S. title. And Roman can retain it, that's fine, but again, he's not looked at as a main eventer yet because he's feuding for the secondary title on Raw. I actually think the fans would have been obviously more receptive to Finn being in that match because Roman was still getting booed heavily at the time. This being 2016, people did not buy into him as a main eventer, and they did not like that. Felt like he was being pushed on us as a top guy rather than it happening organically. And if you want to hear more about that, you can go back to my video talking about what could have been if Roman had turned heel on the Shield in 2014. So now in the 5-on-5 match, let's focus back to Survivor Series. You can still have the segment on Raw they had, which was a great segment, where you have the two teams facing off, and then you have them basically going back and forth, talking about why AJ was talking about why he's the top guy on SmackDown. Kevin Owens talks about why he's the top guy on Raw, and why he's the bigger star, and why his title means more. And then they go back and forth where Braun and Bray Wyatt have their moment. Seth Rollins, by the way, talks about himself and hints at, obviously, a little bit of a Shield reunion because Dean Ambrose is on the other side. Seth had talked about how dangerous it is when him and Roman are on the same page. He talks about having the champion, Braun, and he actually called himself the man at that point. He said, you also have the man on this team, which was referring to himself, which is ironic because of his wife being Becky Lynch. So then, of course, it degenerated to that big brawl where it ended with Raw standing in the middle of the ring and having kicked all the SmackDown wrestlers out, and then they're all just screaming at each other and staring each other down. SmackDown on the outside being kicked out of the ring, and Team Raw having gotten the better of the brawl, standing triumphant in the middle of the ring. As it should have been, because this was a segment happening on Raw. So you can still go ahead and have that 5-on-5 match. I think it still would have been a great match, replacing Roman Reigns with Finn. You're not losing anything in terms of in-ring ability. You can have another guy flying around, similar to Seth Rollins. And I think people would have really wanted to see a moment, or at least you can call it a segment, where AJ and Finn go at it because of their history wrestling in Japan. I think that would have gotten a huge reaction. And to be honest, I know that AJ had gotten eliminated after they did the Shield bomb through the table. They did a mini Shield reunion, and then AJ got pinned. What I think you can have now is you can actually have AJ get eliminated by Finn Balor. So now he's pinned the guy who is the Universal Champion on Raw, but he's also pinned the guy who is the top guy on SmackDown. So this would really establish Finn as a guy, if he ever got drafted and moved over to SmackDown, he could go right into the main event spot there. He can pin AJ with the coup de grace. And you could even have a moment, obviously, where AJ tries to get Finn to turn on Team Raw. He brings up the hand gesture sign that the NWO made famous, brings this and tries to get Finn to, basically do the too sweet sign with him. And that's when Finn obviously fakes it, but then nails AJ, and that's how they can start their segment of the match. Team SmackDown can still win that match because I know the sole survivors were Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton to further their angle on SmackDown. You can still have that. You can have it where Finn is trying to finish off Bray Wyatt. He's going for the shotgun dropkick. Instead, Randy can push Bray out of the way and then take that shotgun dropkick for Bray. Finn gets up to the top, hits Randy with the coup de grace, so he also takes that for him. But then right when he gets up after hitting the coup de grace, he can go right into Sister Abigail and get pinned. Because if you remember in that match, the way it ended is Roman went to spear Bray, Randy pushed Bray out of the way, and the whole thing was Randy just took the bullet for Bray. So you can have a similar moment there. From there on, I think it's easy to honestly bring the Finn match, obviously, to get the rematch going, because then Kevin Owens and Jericho the next night can blame Finn Balor for the loss and saying, you had a chance to win it for us and you let us down, you let all of Raw down, and this is why you're not the champion, and you don't even deserve a rematch. Obviously, Finn can then go on and then take out Chris Jericho after he says something like that. If it's Jericho who does, hits that line of you don't deserve a rematch, then of course they can brawl. It gets broken up by everybody till Mick Foley comes out, and then Foley can then declare that Finn Balor will get his rematch. And I think the next one they were doing was Roadblock, because that's actually where Jericho actually purposely got Kevin Owens disqualified to save his title, because they had hinted, Owens and Jericho had hinted at some dissension in their friendship, but then the whole thing was Kevin Owens was facing Roman Reigns in a title match, and then Jericho comes in, gave Kevin Owens the code breaker, but the whole idea was, Roman Reigns won by disqualification, so Kevin Owens is still the champion. I think you can still do that same ending, and I like the idea of doing that same ending, because at the time, Jericho had also beaten Roman Reigns for the U.S. title. So now, Jericho and Kevin Owens are both champions. Jericho, the U.S. champion, Owens, the undisputed champion, or the Universal champion, sorry. after that match, that would give the ability for Finn Balor to switch his focus and anger on Jericho, because he could be the Universal Champion, but Jericho keeps screwing him out of the win. So he realizes, I have to take out Jericho before I get to Kevin Owens. What you can do there is actually, once he focuses his feud on Jericho, so it would then obviously shift Kevin Owens to his feud that he had with Roman Reigns, because it was Reigns and Owens in a last man standing match, I believe, at Royal Rumble 2017. And I think you could still go that way. They had brought Roman back up to the main event scene, which they needed to do because he was facing the Undertaker at WrestleMania. And I remember they had a really good match at that Royal Rumble. Their first of three, because they just can't seem to stop facing each other at the Royal Rumble every couple of years. But between the three matches they had at the Rumble for the title, this time with Kevin Owens as the champion, that first one in 2017 to me was the best. And that ended, of course, when Kevin Owens won, when Braun Strowman interfered and took out Reigns. Obviously, I know they had Jericho in the shark cage because they wanted to keep him out of interfering. But I still think you could have Jericho work that night and have a match before the shark cage. So then Jericho can even, kind of a throwback to his WCW days, talk about the conspiracy against him and his best friend Kevin Owens. He's trying to make Jericho put his U.S. title on the line before he has to think about his best friend Kevin Owens being in his title match and being suspended in that shark cage. And I think there, at that Rumble, you can have Finn Balor win the U.S. title against Jericho. You can do it somewhat similar to what they did what they've done in the past, where a guy obviously works the match but then comes back for the Rumble. Because you can even have Finn in the Rumble. Because I know he was in the Iron Man spot, I believe in 2018 in the Rumble. He did the thing where he comes in first and lasts like 55 minutes before getting eliminated. I think just to show how good of a worker Finn is, and I think Finn could have done this. He could have had a good match with Jericho, won the U.S. title, and then said he's still focused on the Universal title, be put in the Rumble, do the Iron Man spot, come close to winning, but maybe get eliminated in the Final Four or so. That would then make Finn Balor a champion. Going now, obviously, they still have, before they go into WrestleMania, they had Fastlane. And I wanted to make Finn a champion, make sure he was a champion going into Mania so he had a meaningful feud. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I know he would not have gone into Mania as champion. Because around this same time in that November, remember Goldberg came back. And he reignited his feud with Brock Lesnar. And they put the Universal title on Goldberg. He had beaten Kevin Owens at Fastlane when Owens got distracted by a returning Chris Jericho. The best friends finally disintegrated when Kevin Owens turned on Jericho at the Festival of Friendship. That was a funny segment. It went for a bit, but the whole thing was Jericho had all these gifts for KO. Then tells him, I've had so much fun working with you, over the summer. This has been one of the favorite moments of my career. Kevin Owens then has a gift for Jericho. It's a new list because Jericho had been doing the List of Jericho gimmick at that point. And then he gives Jericho the new list, but then Jericho says, why is my name on it? And the big reveal is it's the list of KO, and Kevin Owens had turned on Jericho at that point. So Jericho came out to distract Owens at Fastlane. Owens, in a quick match, then gets speared and jackhammered and loses his Universal title. So Finn wouldn't have been in that picture because I know they want the focus for that title was on Brock and Goldberg. So you can still have Finn be the U.S. champion. And going into that, on SmackDown, the Intercontinental Champion was Dean Ambrose. At that Mania, it was honestly kind of weird to me. Because Ambrose, who had been booked and presented as a top guy for a while, it wasn't that he was Intercontinental Champion. He faced Baron Corbin in the pre-show, so he wasn't even on the main card. Yes, Dean Ambrose did win the match, but again, I remember thinking, why is a title match like this not on the main show? And I actually think what they could have done is they could have played off SmackDown versus Raw like they've done in the past with those interpromotional matches, like they did with Lashley versus Bobby Lashley versus Umaga in 2007, and then Batista versus Umaga in 2008. You can have a champion versus champion match. U.S. champion Finn Balor versus Intercontinental champion Dean Ambrose. And from there, I don't think they ever locked up, but actually, not for a title, but obviously the interpromotional match, the bragging rights on the line. Stephanie can tell Finn the whole thing, because she was the heel GM. She can have that line that she had for Survivor Series, fight like your job depends on it, because it does. And then she can basically give him a condescending pep talk, saying, we expect you to come out the winner in this match. We expect you to be more successful with the U.S. title than you were as Universal Champion, and we expect you to win against Dean Ambrose in SmackDown. Something like that. And I think that's a match that could be put on the main card. And in that, I do think Finn Balor should win. He should beat Dean Ambrose. So in that sense, what it gives him a victory over all three members of the Shield. And of course, he wins with the coup de grace. So he's beaten Roman on Raw. He beats Seth at SummerSlam. And then now he beats Dean Ambrose at WrestleMania. Champion versus champion, Finn Balor gets his hand raised. And I think that would really solidify him as a top guy. And one of the main eventers that you can put in the world title picture and you can talk about with credibility is someone who can win the Universal title around that time. Because if you do remember, after that WrestleMania, so that would have been WrestleMania 33, Finn did come back the next night and team with Seth Rollins. He was back from injury and he got a good reaction. But he's never been looked at as a top guy since. He's always been in the mix now. He went back to NXT, won the NXT title, won the US title, won the Intercontinental title. But in terms of world title opportunities, after he got injured and came back, he didn't technically get his rematch to win back a title he never lost until Royal Rumble in 2019 against Brock Lesnar when Brock Lesnar was champion. And everyone knew he wasn't winning it at that point. Yeah, it was a fun match because Finn could fly around for Lesnar. And Lesnar did take some bumps on the announce table to his stomach, and they did a callback to his 2012 match with Triple H and talked about the issues he had had with his stomach with diverticulitis and tried to make you think Finn could win because Brock did do a good job selling his stomach for the rest of the match and that he couldn't chuck Finn around like he'd been doing. But everyone knew it wasn't a realistic match for Finn. He didn't have any chance to win. And besides that, now last year he lost to Seth Rollins at SummerSlam in their match for Seth's World Heavyweight Championship. So that injury definitely really hurt his career, in my opinion, because they went from focusing on him, but then the focus obviously was good that it went to Kevin Owens, but Finn never got back into that main event title picture, which is, I think, a shame because I really think he could have been a good draw for the company. He had a real good run in New Japan, and he was very popular in NXT, and it was a big deal when he went to the main roster on Raw at first. I know now he's obviously in a good angle with Judgment Day, where this is going with him and Dominic and Liv and Rhea, but it's still nothing world title related. So that's how I think they could have done. They could have booked Finn throughout his time as champion, and then chasing the title and feuding with Owens and Jericho for a while, before ultimately going and then winning the U.S. title from Jericho and winning at WrestleMania. So guys, let me know what you think with that. I just wanted to book it through his injury right before he came back. What do you think would have happened with Finn? Do you think he was destined for the mid-card? Do you think he could have had a good run as champion? Do you think it could have gone longer than the few months I gave it? But I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. Also, I want to again say thank you to the people that have commented on my videos recently, especially on the last one. I definitely want to hear what you guys think and what you guys would want to hear me talk about in terms of a what-if scenario. Just so you know, I already have the next two topics already decided, thanks to people's comments on my last one. and they're both Triple H related. So if you're a fan of Triple H, you're going to want to tune in. You might like what I say, you might not, but I definitely have quite a few thoughts on it. The next one I'll just tell you would be, what if Triple H didn't marry Stephanie McMahon in 2003? There's some things I've definitely already put some thought into this one. There are things I think that would have definitely changed. Not in the time period people think, to be honest. No. I'm not going to give too much away, but I definitely have some thoughts on that one. And the next one after that will also be about Triple H. And what if the famous 1996 Madison Square Garden curtain call never happened? And if you don't know the curtain call, that's another topic that has been talked about quite a bit ad nauseum, much like the Finger Poke of Doom and others that happened in the 90s. But if you want to know what that's about, go look that up, and I definitely have a lot of thoughts on that as well. So again, guys, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you, everyone who comments and watches, and let me hear your opinions. And even if you don't agree, I definitely want to hear what you guys think. So till next time, thank you again, and take care, everyone.